had done a thorough job, but here was feedback before we had told part of our constituency. So to be an effective communicator is to the right audience, the 360 concept, but also vision and feedback, but respecting the fact that the way to reach the constituency is very dramatically different today than even 5 or 10 years ago, and seems to change each day with the Skypes of the world and so forth, things that we're all familiar with. My fourth point of the 5 talks about style. The one thing that we've all learned, because we've all had different and interesting experiences, is that the style of, there's no one right style of leadership. It's a series of components. But I thought I'd take a shot. People often ask me, what do you think is the most significant style? And I think my answer surprised a lot of them, and that is a predictable style. To be predictable when you're leading an organization. And in some sense, that has remained the same, in some sense has changed. Let me explain. When the style is predictable, when a leader is going to lead with good news and bad news, the organization must know how he or she is going to react. And that's critical because if you're simply dealing with short-term whims of the leader, you're apt to do what is right for the short term to please him or her, and not what's the right for the medium or long-term goals of the organization. And it's can be very much of a negative on what we'll talk about in the 5th point, and that is developing an ongoing culture for the business. So what I believe can be taught, and one of the things that I hope comes from this outstanding work that Andrew and team are going to be doing, is the technique of being predictable. How do you, besides your personality, how do you learn to be predictable? How do you provide feedback into your constituency? And not only when we talk about the top tier of leadership, but in organizations today that are far more complex, as we discussed earlier, and particularly as there are acquisitions, particularly as there are growing into parts of the world that some people aren't familiar with dealing with. How are you going to be predictable further down into the organization? How do you have a young leader or manager be predictable in the medium, mid-level managers or organization in the case of nonprofits? So the 4th point is to develop in more complex organizations today than before,